Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. My most popular series is back. The Dirty Dozen is here for another update. These have been popular tier list videos since my channel's inception, and I tend to update them after a new guild boss or meta event. We have just had Belisarius Cawl release, but also huge changes to Ragnar, Eldryon and Vitruvius, so let's take a look at how things shape out. As a reminder to newer viewers of the channel, I've been playing this game for over 2 years and generally do pretty well in various game modes. I'm only telling you this to hopefully lend some credibility to what I'm about to discuss. The Dirty Dozen uses 3 key metrics to evaluate characters: their use in guild raids, guild war, and horde mode, a term I've coined to describe performance in wave-based modes like legendary release events and survival. The idea is to allow you, the viewer and player, to maximize your investment and game rewards. If you don't like that min-max sort of strategy, that's fine. I'm just warning you about the nature of this video and its content. I always give away some freebies with these videos, so here's a juicy code in advance of my 19k subscriber milestone. Leave a comment below to be entered into a giveaway for Tangita shards. We'll start with a brief general overview of things. This was last edition's Dirty Dozen, and now we have the current edition. I'll talk about all 12 characters, but I want to spend more time on a specific few, so let's start with the easy stuff. The AdMech team. When they're good, they are the best against many bosses, but require heavy levels of investment. The core of that team are now all pictured in the Dirty Dozen. I'll go into more depth regarding Vitruvius later. The nuance within the team that sees characters like Tangita and Actus do better than Exeter Row is that the former characters are also good in horde mode and war due to the summoning and healing parts of their kits. Sho is another quick one. Historically fits well as the 5th character on the AdMech team, but scores higher than Exeter Row due to his usefulness in horde mode and war. With the recent changes to Sho's AI, he is even stronger on ward defense, and I think a lot of new players will benefit from investment here. Calgar is still a reasonably good buffer for many teams in guild raids, but has fallen away over time. He maintains some value due to his powerful active ability in guild war and horde modes too. Abraxas rounds out the top 12 due to how great his summons are in many different modes, which gives him the edge over other characters in the Psyker team, who languish further down in the rankings. With the simpler stuff out of the way, let's transition to some more detailed analysis. The biggest winner and success story recently has been boss Gulgortz. Gulgortz plays in both the multi-hit and mech teams as one of their top characters. We can take a look at this run I did in the pre-Ragnar nerfs with Gulgortz to explain some key principles. On turn 1, Gulgortz is able to use his WAG ability to clear some of the adds or spawns right away. Step 1 complete. Now, Ragnar and Kharn also gain bonus damage for their first turn attacks for being adjacent, and Snot also gains the bonus damage because he is an orc. Ragnar does his double howl, and everyone gets in to hit the avatar. Cool. The next nice bit about Gulgortz is that he has the big target trait. So when everyone gets pushed away by the avatar's Wrath of Cain unleashed, Gulgortz is still in the same spot, and with some forward thinking, you can keep the avatar locked in place. It's helpful here because it means that Sonji, the broadside, gets to deal more damage, but the same principles can be applied for the mech team. Locking the boss in place means more hits with Exeter Row. Okay, great. I'll speed through the rest of that fight in case this replay is useful for any of you in the future. Gulgortz also does well against other bosses where there are adds to kill, like Magnus. On this particular map, you can see how the combination of Aun'Shi and Gulgortz on turn 2 allows Ragnar to reach this high ground hex at the top of the map and deal a load of high ground damage. So we've established that Gulgortz is pretty good with the multi-hit team, but what about the mechs? These days I've been liking him even more than Sho as the 5th character. Let me explain why. First, Gulgortz's passive counts as an extra attack, so he generates 2 hits for Exeter Row. Fine. But the great value with Gulgortz is that he creates summons. Summoned units act in the order that they are created. So let's look at this avatar example again. We summon Orc Boys first and then create some summons with Tangita. In subsequent turns, when the Guardians spawn, the Orc Boys run off to deal with them, and this lets our mechanical summons stay focused on the boss and trigger more Exeter Row charges. This value is seen again on bosses like Sarek. Take this legendary 5 Sarek map that we had recently. We bait Sarek off his throne and then summon with the orcs. On subsequent turns, when the death marks are spawned, the orc boys deal with them and the Skitarii stay focused on Sarek. If you play well, you can block off all of the spawn points for Sarek and make this fight really trivial. I've spent a lot of time on raids for Gulgortz, but he's amazing in war too, where the Wag gives you an explosive turn that is crucial to winning war fights. The orc boys also stick around as distractors later on. Next, Vitruvius. Vitruvius can be used to add a hit to your other characters and summons, and has widely replaced Eldryon in the mech team as a 1-for-1 swap. The comparison of Eldryon and Vitruvius boils down to whether more damage or more hits is valuable. More damage lets the Exeter Row passive overcome high boss armor, but if the boss armor is low, then Vitruvius with his extra hits is a better character. I could crunch loads of numbers and do lots of math for you, but I thought that these graphs might be more illustrative. My guild, Alpha Legion, track our raid damage. So, with the help of Tawan, Tacticus Ambassador and friend, I've created some graphs. In green are my reps with Vitruvius on the test server, and in blue are how we performed as a guild against those bosses for those respective seasons. I've used the same strategies that we used in those seasons, despite the fact that we have changed some of them now. For example, we now use Gulgortz against level 5 Sarek, but when we collected this data in blue, we were still using Sho'Syl. The results are kind of what you would expect. Versus Sarek, who is a low armor boss, Vitruvius makes the team stronger than before. However, against bosses with high armor, Vitruvius is a significant downgrade on Eldryon. Nonetheless, he's an incredible piece for the AdMech team, and accordingly earns his place on the Dirty Dozen. What about the elephant in the room? Ragnar, Kharn, and Aun'Shi. Technically 3 elephants. If you're comparing the team's performance pre-nerf and post-nerf, it looks a lot worse now. Sure, Ragnar's Howl gives a nice 1600 damage boost at max settings, but that is a 20% decrease to the previous Warhowl, which is fairly significant. It's nice that newer players just get that damage benefit without needing to work on expensive crit items, but overall the team performs worse. These characters form the core of the multi-hit team, and that team is still good in the same places as before. We do have to acknowledge the nerfs though, and has made the characters slightly worse. Snotflogga has seen his stock rise alongside Gulgortz. He is great when the multi-hit team includes Ragnar, and he also gains the Warhowl benefits for his main attack. Beyond that, the value of Snot in guild raids is in his grots. These little guys are actually reasonably tanky, self-replicate, and fulfill many roles. They help block the boss in place, and they both kill and distract enemy adds or summons, most admirably against Magnus the Red. Snotflogga is a great character and one I've really come to love. The power of the grots extends to war and horde mode, making him a rare 5 out of 5 in both of those areas too. Before we go into the top 30 characters, I thought I would take a bit more time and talk about guild raid teams. You'll probably recognize this slide from my previous Dirty Dozen, which talks about each guild raid meta team at the moment. The first team is the multi-hit team, which asks you to stack multi-hitters with damage buffers to end up doing a lot of damage to the enemy bosses. A typical team might look like this, but you can substitute characters in and out as long as they are either a multi-hitter or a damage buffer. The mechanical team centers around exploiting Exeter Row. Each time a mechanical unit, be it a character or summon, makes an attack, Exeter Row triggers some out-of-turn damage. This damage can get out of control pretty quickly, especially when you consider Vitruvius and High Ground as potential multipliers. The Psyker team is last and asks you to use the Neurothrope as the cornerstone of the team. You build up stacks on a boss, and once the boss is at 15 stacks of Neuroparasite, you give the Neurothrope 2 hits with Yazagor's active ability and take the High Ground for a large amount of damage. I'm telling you this because before I get into the recommendations and rankings for each character, you have to appreciate that using these teams against bosses requires some understanding and nuance. Let's take the mechanical team against the guild raid boss Rogaldorn. The Rogaldorn battle tank puts down this area of effect attack every so often, which means if your units move, it triggers a salvo of damage. If your mechanical team is small, then this interaction wipes your summons and your team. But if you have a developed mechanical team, then everyone survives and you put up massive scores against the battle tank. Once you understand that, you understand why, despite being the best against the tank, I struggle with giving the mechs a perfect 5 against Dorn. I could give you a matrix that tell you what teams are best in slot at various rarities, but of the over 66,000 of you who watched the last Dirty Dozen, I can appreciate it's probably quite hard to give you something standardized. Nonetheless, here is the Pants of Horus infographic on guild raid bosses. I think it's a reasonably accurate summary, but I've added an overlay with some tweaks based on my own opinion. There is a link to their Discord in the video description if you want to ask them questions about it. With that in mind, here are the top 12 raid characters in the game. You'll notice that the mechanical and multi-hit teams dominate the rankings. The Psyker team is fine, but really only excels versus a few bosses, and therefore doesn't do well enough across the board to make it into the top 12. Tier lists are always going to be subjective, and you could argue some of these up or down by a point or so, but I think this is reasonably accurate, with a caveat that we just don't have enough time or reps with the multi-hit team post-nerfs. Here are the scores for the top 30 characters that didn't quite make the Dirty Dozen cut. We can see some familiar names here. Bellator is a starter character that holds value in later stages of the game, but the bosses are now more complex and have more armor, so he has fallen away. Bellator's multiple summons and general tankiness still make him reasonable in Guild War and Horde mode. Eldryon suffers from the nerfs as expected. He's still a good choice in the multi-hit team, but that team is overall worse now, and Eldryon loses value in Guild War because he no longer buffs abilities. Still, top 14 out of 80 or so characters is still pretty good, and I think you'll end up bringing him the majority of the time for the multi-hit team. The next three blend a combination of being good in Horde mode and Guild Wars, but as they are all mechs, they can also be used alongside the mech raid team in the right circumstances. Helbrecht is lurking here at rank 25, but make no mistake, when he is good, he's the best. Helbrecht is the best buffer against Psykers, and I would advocate for him strongly. Psykers are going nowhere in the Warhammer universe, and I suspect Helbrecht's stock is going to remain high for a long time. I'll let you digest the rest of the top 30 in your own time. I'll close out with one of my runs against Cawl to give you an idea of the characters and strategies that I'm using post-update. This will probably improve over time, as most things do. As this video is running in the background, I'll close out with a bit of advice to newer players. The best thing I can suggest for you in this game is to join a strong guild. Guild raids in particular are a massive resource boost in your Tacticus career, and the sooner that you are cycling through bosses, the better it is for you and your roster. Sadly, guild raids and guild war rewards are a case of the rich getting richer, and you need to put yourself in a position to grow your roster. Join the official Tacticus Discord if you're new, or if you are a veteran player and want to try your luck at the top, join us at the Eye of Terror to find a guild. I hope you enjoyed that. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support my work, but otherwise I'll see you soon. Bye for now.